Mouthwashing is one of those 2 to 3 hour games on Steam that end up randomly being a Game of the Year candidate. You know, your Iron Lung or Firewatch type of games. I played Mouthwashing knowing it was some kind of sci-fi horror, which is right up my alley. But I left realizing that it is very profound and a deeply interesting story that I loved so much. And it covers some very heavy themes and subjects through the scope of this claustrophobic sci-fi horror medium. It's crafted so well by Wrong Organ, the devs of the game, and I came to the conclusion that it would be the perfect piece of art to cover for my first YouTube video. Before we get into it, I'm going to preface this video by saying that if you are at all sensitive to topics like self-harm, sexual assault, blood and gore, body horror, or anything along those lines, then I would highly encourage you to click off the video or do some of your own research about the contents of the game to make sure you are able to handle it before watching. And with that, we can finally get into the extremely claustrophobic and grotesque world of one of the best games of 2024, Mouthwashing. Mouthwashing follows the crew of a long-haul cargo freighter, the Tulpar, consisting of the captain and head pilot, Curly, the co-pilot, Jimmy, the nurse, Anya, and the good old blue-collar engineer, Swansea, accompanied by his newly acquired intern/protege, Daisuke. The game starts with a mini cutscene as text fades in mentioning the Tulpar, how many crew members there are. Then we see that the shipment duration is actually 382 days, so over a year, pretty long. Then the elapsed transit time appears, revealing our crew has around 100 days left for their long haul. Not too long. That's before some very out of place text appears, to say the least, reading, "I hope this hurts." This won't be the last time we see that message. All the other text fades away, leaving only the "I hope this hurts" segment on the screen, as the audio and display distorts, sending us to a cockpit. We're then informed by the navigational system that what looks like an asteroid is in our way, in the way of our course, as we're prompted to make a correction leftwards, as to not make an impact with the asteroid, but upon trying to turn the ship left, our only option is to steer right. So we do that, and we're hit with a warning that the ship will collide with the asteroid, and that the autopilot has been turned on to correct it. Then we see an interesting message that reads, 4,000 credits docked from crew pay package for failure of navigational staff. Now, this message kind of hints that our crew is working for what seems to be a pretty corrupt, messed up company. And as the game progresses, we'll see just how corrupt they are. They're kind of the catalyst for everything that happens here through their negligence, really. The player then has to disable the autopilot as the screen is flashed with a more aggressive warning this time, and the lights in the ship start blinking red. Sirens ringing out across the Tulpar. The screen now reads "Crash imminent," with our only place to go out of the cockpit and into the halls. As we walk the halls, they seem to be a maze, never-ending, while the walls get increasingly covered with more and more of what seems to be some kind of work encouragement posters for what we can only assume is the company our crew works for. As the lights begin to flicker, the audio growing louder and more distorted. This is until we reach a dead end, with a little horse or pony statue blocking our passage, along with the pipes that line the Tulpar walls twisted and mangled like a web behind it. The player is then forced to turn around and double back as we hear baby cries sound throughout the halls. Eventually we come across another pony statue, but this time it's deformed. It has a few extra legs protruding out of areas it definitely should not be protruding out of, prompting the player to turn around again. As the music cries and the off-putting noises grow louder and louder, the player grows more tense and more tense. The sirens and red flashing lights return until we reach a locked door, and a bone-chilling scream rings out as we turn around to see an even more deformed pony statue. Then the screen fades to white, marking the end of Chapter 1. I think this is a really promising intro to the game. The opening cutscene provides some pivotal information, but it also has a kind of eerie analog horror feel to it. It really reminded me of some of those older Spooky Scary Sunday intros, if you know, you know. Then the cockpit sequence really sets the story into motion really well. You know, the asteroid hitting the Tulpar is the main causation of everything that happens in the story, while it also establishes a really, really sick sci-fi setting in this ship that is broken and our crew's trying to survive. I also really like how it's still a mystery as to who crashed the Tulpar to this point and what their motivations were for crashing it, and that really gives the player a reason to keep playing, you know? It really hooks them. And the hallway segment is done really, really well. It sets up the claustrophobic tone and feel that the game has and keeps throughout the entire thing. And it establishes really great sound design and music from the start. The devs for this game and all of their games, amazing music, amazing original soundtracks and sound design. And overall, just a super promising intro that when I first was playing it, really hooked me and kept me playing throughout. We fade back in as we see the crew sitting all around a table in the lounge with the text 2 months after the crash on the screen. This is where we get our first bit of dialogue between our crew, where they debate whether or not they should open the cargo hold as it could aid in their survival. But as Swansea mentions, their pay would be docked because of it. Tough decision. Die? Or not have any more money? I wonder which one. Jimmy then asserts himself as a leader, saying that if there's any chance at all that what's in the cargo hold could help them survive, then they should definitely check it out. Then Daisuke also remarks that the Pony Express bosses really aren't chill at all. No, they definitely aren't, Daisuke. The group then discusses how to get inside the cargo hold, as Anya recalls that you can get inside with an access code, but said access code can only be uncovered using something called a code scanner, which will be a reoccurring item throughout the entire game. Jimmy then asks if the captain's the only one with a code scanner, as Swansea replies with an oddly sarcastic answer. Swansea says, "Of course, go ahead and ask him all about it then. Maybe he'll sing you the blues too," possibly hinting that the captain was maybe injured or incapacitated in some form during the crash, which could also suggest he's the one who caused it in the first place. Jimmy then assures that, for better or for worse, he's the captain now, and that he'll figure it out, as we enter our next gameplay section with the objective to find the code scanner. As we walk around the Tulpar Lounge, we see a few interesting things. First, we see the posters that were lining the walls in the opening cutscene, except now we can inspect them. We could take a closer look, all of them being a sort of form of Pony Express workplace encouragement, kind of like their version of the Hang in There Cat poster, although these have some rather concerning fine print on them. For example, the poster encouraging workplace safety has a fine print reading, "Medical expenses will be docked from personal credits," or the poster triumphing over Pony Express's punctual deliveries has a fine print reading, "Late deliveries will be docked from personal credits." These posters really serve to deepen our distrust in Pony Express, and even this early on depicts them as this money-hungry, heartless organization, and that's really what they are. Believe me, this isn't the worst or the cheapest they can get, between these posters with this fine print and docking pay for every little thing, like in Chapter 1 with the navigational error. They docked 4,000 credits just off of that, so we'll see just how bad they can get, and even, how early on in the game we're seeing just how bad they are already. We can also see some other things around the lounge, like how they make most all of their food out of these water and gelatin and sweetener packets. Seems like a Pony Express thing to do. You gotta mix them in different ways to make different kinds of things, as well as coffee and food vending machine-esque dispensers, a giant display screen that seems to be simulating some kind of evening or sunset, and insulation foam covering a few areas of the lounge that was deployed when the hull was breached in the crash, blocking off the compromised parts of the ship, keeping them alive effectively. We then make our way deeper into the Tulpar, where we see Swansea guarding the entrance to the utility room. When we try to question him as to what he's guarding in there, he jots down our advances, but Jimmy reiterates that now everything is his business. He's the captain, and Swansea claims that he's just working, he's doing whatever he needs to be doing, clearly being intentionally vague, but Jimmy presses him for some more answers, until eventually Swansea says that the room is a solid wall of foam, just like the foam we saw in the lounge. And he's trying to carefully break enough away to get something useful out, like his tools, that can hopefully help them in their survival, but he won't let anyone else mess around in there out of safety concerns. But he's not finished there, as Swansea then goes on a bit of a rant about why he won't let anyone in, showing some discontent towards Daisuke and Anya, calling them, kind of dimwits. And I guess also his useless kids back home? I don't know. Next we go to the cockpit, and immediately upon entering you notice that it is the most foamed up room we've seen yet. The screens are stuck on flashing red warnings, and it is extremely damaged. The code scanner is just laying on the ground in the middle of the room, so we pick it up and we make our way to the med bay. And this is where we get our first look at who's easily the most iconic and recognizable character from this game, Curly. We walk into the med bay and see a body laying on a stretcher in front of one of those simulation screens, his body seemingly covered from head to toe in bandages barring his left eye and mouth. Anya standing near the bed. Upon talking to her, we learn that Curly is in immense pain constantly, even hurting when swallowing the painkillers. In this dialogue, we see Jimmy's first bit of hostility toward Anya. This reoccurs often, and for a reason, as we'll see later, as he gives her a bit of a snide, backhanded, and honestly just completely rude remark, suggesting that she's a bad nurse and that Pony Express knows how to cut corners when hiring employees, as if she's not keeping somebody alive whose whole body is burned to the point where they have to be covered in bandages from head to toe, Anya then asks Jimmy to help administer Curly his painkillers since she can't stand the sounds of pain he makes when he takes them, to which Jimmy makes another snide remark, prompting Anya to offer to do it herself. But Jimmy insists on doing it, so the player then grabs the painkillers off the table, cozies up to Curly. You then have to manually open his mouth, give him the meds, then allow him to swallow it, which is followed by an absolutely stomach-churning soundbite of Curly swallowing mixed with grunts of pain. Also, whenever you inspect Curly in this screen, his one eye follows your cursor around wherever it goes. You can then inspect the med bay a little bit more, and upon doing so, you can come across a broken vent in the room, which Jimmy says has been busted since before the crash. The player then makes their way back into the lounge, where you can see Anya on her knees rocking back and forth, clearly in some kind of distress. Jimmy tells her that they're almost out of painkillers, but as he's saying this, he's cut off by Anya, where she confirms our suspicions that Curly is the one who crashed the Tulpar. She asks Jimmy why he thought Curly did it, but he replies that it doesn't matter, that no answer would ever make any of them feel better about the situation. Anya then says, "I have to believe that our worst moments don't make us monsters, Jim." This is a recurring theme of the game, and this specific quote comes back up a lot of times, especially pertaining to Anya. Jimmy makes his way to the cargo hold door, ready to open it. Daisuke, Swansea, Anya are all waiting for the reveal, just like us. Daisuke is hopeful for some spare parts. Then Swansea tells him to quit his yapping. Anya pleads for it to be an essential like food or water or medicine. Jimmy uses the code scanner, inputs the code, opens the door, and it's on to Chapter 3. Okay, Chapter 2. I think there was a lot of good things here too. I think showing even more distrust between Pony Express and the workers with the code scanner stuff. I think that worked really well. The mystery in the cargo hold is really, really great. It's kind of like the beginning where they have a lot of stuff in there that keeps me playing. That's definitely one of them for the next few chapters at least. And then we also see a lot of like the beginnings of personality traits of characters like Swansea, because he's gonna be angry the entire time. So we see that first here, and other than that, the first intro of the main cast, I feel like they did that pretty well. Could have maybe been a bit better, but opening in on them right after I think was a start to it. The dialogue is written pretty well. They all seem to bounce off each other decently well. The posters, I like the posters a lot. I think it gives it a nice, like, almost dystopian feel to this universe, kind of. Same thing with the computerized sunsets and stuff like that. Like, again, kind of a corrupt future AI type of thing going on there. Swansea Garden Utility, that's a little, a little bit more of a mystery thing there. We got a lot of stuff going on that keeps us playing. What else? First look at Curly. That's a big one. Curly looks awesome. His design is like really cool body horror stuff. I really like his design, and he's like, the poster child of the game. He's gonna be the thumbnail probably. And then we also see Jimmy being a dick to Anya for the first time, and plays back into the character traits and stuff like that. We're gonna see a lot of that. The noises that Curly makes when you're feeding him the medicine. Once again, absolutely awesome. The eye following the cursor, definitely not eyes, eye following cursor. That's a cool little thing. Broken vent could be something later on. Who knows? The worst moments don't make us monsters thing. I like that quote a lot, and I like that theme that reoccurs often. And then leaving the cliffhanger is pretty good. Not gonna lie, it's pretty good. We open in the med bay with the text 7 days before the crash on the screen. The dialogue begins, and the subtitles reveal to us that we're now playing as Curly, obviously before the crash, and we're talking to Anya about her psychological evaluations that she gives to all of the crew members, and how she wishes that he'd open up more to her during these evaluations. Anya then says that she only has one more evaluation left to do, but she's hesitant to say who it is, as Curly guesses Jimmy correctly, showing some more annoyance or animosity between these two. She then complains that Jimmy doesn't take these evaluations seriously, that he thinks they're a game, giving answers like, "I have found myself sexually excited at the sight of cartoon horses." This is definitely a projection from Jimmy. He seems like a brony. Curly offers to do Jimmy's psych eval for her, to which she accepts, as Curly exclaims that he has known Jimmy for a long time. A little bit of a lore drop there. Anya then passes along a sticky note message from Swansea to Curly, reading, "They can't expect me to perform miracles," as the player stands up, given the objective to talk to Jimmy and Swansea. We make our way to Jimmy and Swansea as we see the Tulpar in pristine condition. No foam, no damage, nothing, as the display screen in the lounge is now depicting a bright blue cloudy sky. A perfect day. Curly arrives at utility with Jimmy standing outside the door. Jimmy and Curly then converse about how there's something broken in the utility room and how the Tulpar is now starting to show her age, which suggests that this crew has been doing this for a while now. Curly then remarks that they added Daisuke last minute and that he didn't account for 5 crew members, criticizing Pony Express for their continued tomfoolery, as we've seen. Then Curly is prompted to enter utility with Swansea. Curly enters, and the first thing we see are these 4 big cryopods. Inspecting one of them tells us that each hold 20 years of backup power in case of emergencies. Continuing on, we see Daisuke trapped in foam, and Swansea with a disappointed look on his face with his arms crossed. Swansea complains some more about Daisuke's incompetence, starting to sound like a broken record, as Daisuke explains that he was just trying to fix the broken vent when the foam deployed and covered him. Swansea says that the captain is the only one who has access to the fire axe, so Curly obtains the axe and breaks Daisuke free. Daisuke then calls Swansea fat, which is low-key deserved. Curly then presses Swansea a little bit, telling him that the foam could have damaged the pods and that he can't let this sort of thing happen again, as the player and Jimmy leave to the cockpit for Jimmy's psych evaluation. Curly begins his trek to the cockpit when we encounter our first dream sequence type of thing. The wiki calls them bizarro events, so I guess I'll call them that too. The music slows down and distorts a little when we're just about to enter the cockpit. Instead of seeing the cockpit, it's an abhorrently long staircase that Curly walks down until we get to the bottom. The cockpit door is back, and we open it, and you guessed it, it's not the cockpit. The ground now consists of the pipes that usually line the Tulpar walls, and there's a very steep drop-off into what I guess is like the void. I don't know, man. It's darkness. Dropping down into the void for a good 5 seconds, we land in what seems to be an ocean of some kind of pinkish red liquid. As we delve further into it, the sky turns into space. Stars, nebulae, and constellations fill up the void. Moving deeper, a siren-like screech sounds out, almost like a whale call. Getting louder and sharper the further we go. Eventually, flood sirens play as emergency warning screens appear all around us. But then broken ladders begin to jot out from the sea every which way until the sun begins to rise over the horizon, blinding Curly. When our vision returns, we're in a solid white room with only a door in the distance in our sight. Curly runs over to it, and it's finally the cockpit with Jimmy sitting there waiting for us. Maybe Anya's evaluation of Curly wasn't quite thorough enough. Curly and Jimmy begin the evaluation. Once they finish, Curly asks Jimmy how he's been off the record. Jimmy says he likes it on the Tulpar, that they're in control there. Curly then says he didn't expect Jimmy to take to the freighter pilot job as well as he has so far, given his problems back home, maybe hinting at Jimmy struggling with money or something along those lines back at Earth. Jimmy then complains that everyone says Curly is such a great leader all the time, to the point that it gets annoying to him. Curly confides in Jimmy, posing the question, is this enough? Or does he only continue to be a freighter captain because he's successful at it? Curly's afraid that he's all figured out, that a good long-haul freighter captain is all he'll ever be. He then ponders taking the risk of trying something new, even if he might be bad at it. Jimmy validates his concerns, comparing it to reaching the top rung on a ladder, calling back to the ladders in the Bizarro sequence, and questioning if you're on the right ladder at all, but it's a long way down from the top no matter how you cut it. Just then, the navigation system beeps, and an incoming message graphic pops up on the screen. Jimmy quips that it's the big guys themselves and that that's his cue to leave. Curly grabs the fax news from corporate, but before we can read it, the audio distorts, the screen displays take responsibility in scrambled up letters, as we're on to chapter 4. Alright, chapter 3. I like chapter 3. Good chapter. First chapter that we play as Curly, that's pretty cool. The first chapter that's before the crash, that stuff's all cool. We see Curly as a captain here, asserting his authority, building his character a little bit. The first Bizarro sequence as well, and it's really cool. It's like, it reminds me a lot of Jacob's Ladder in the way that it's like really fantastical, and like there's a lot of fantasy stuff to it, but it has like a space twist on it, which is like, obviously the set in space, but yeah, it has a space twist on it. A lot of Jacob's Ladder type of visuals in there. I liked it a lot. Good first Bizarro sequence. I especially liked the whale calls in the Bizarro sequence. I don't know, weird, cool. Jimmy's psyche eval, that's a really big, important part of this chapter. It's a lot of character, not really character development, but like we see a lot into Jimmy and Curly's relationship, which is a really important one, and especially Curly's character in this chapter with his struggles with his career and stuff like that, and it really plays into his struggle that kind of moves the story forward, like him not being able, and we'll see this later on, we'll see a lot of this later on, but Curly, like, always looking at the bigger picture is like such an underrated part of this game, and we'll see that expanded upon as we move forward. The message from Pony Express leaves in, again, a good cliffhanger for the next chapter. I like that. Curly and Anya shows their dynamic for the first time. It was it was kind of like your average like boss coworker, but it's cool. What else? The cryopods gives us something to think about with Swansea in the current timeline. Is he telling the truth about the utility room? I don't know. Daisuke and Swansea. Like, why is Swansea so mean to Bro? Now this is where we start to get into some of the meat of the character stuff. Like, there's a lot of good stuff with Jimmy in this one. It shows him needing control through his psych evaluation, and it shows really early signs of his like discontent towards Curly, because like Curly is just the better version of Jimmy, and everybody on the ship knows that, including him, and you can see it building in him, even though it implies that Jimmy and Curly are good friends from the past, and even I think it kind of implies that Curly could have even gotten Jimmy that job because they're friends. Yet, Curly's more successful, people like him more, so he's showing a little signs of envy here. And, big part of the story. The player seems to be in the cargo hold, except almost all of the lights are out. We traverse deeper in until a TV turns on in the distance, the static growing louder as we get closer. The player arrives at the box TV and is prompted to interact with it. Changing the channel, first we see a sort of instructional cartoon playing pertaining to running a business.
A business operating at a steady profit can give its workers security and employee benefits. Operating at a profit, a business can provide the employee with comfortable, colorful working conditions.
Changing it again depicts what seems to be a clip of a star dying and turning into a black hole. Then a clip of an informational kids' science show about atoms.
Here, in fact, is the answer to a dream as old as man himself. A giant of limitless power at man's command. And where was it science found that giant? In the atom. A particle so infinitely small that it takes over 100 billion atoms to make up the head of a pin. Just as other millions and
Then an odd snippet of butchers hauling meat into a meat locker.
and cabbage.
A normal children's cartoon.
Hurry, step right up, folks. Here's the answer to your problems. Dr. Utopia's sensational new discovery, ism. Ism will cure...
A skeleton puppet that loses his limbs and then dances. And finally, an ad for Dragon Breath mouthwash. As we zoom into the TV, the audio and video lags, and then we move on to Chapter 5. Mouthwash, good. It's like the name of the game. Alright, obviously this chapter, really short compared to the rest of them, but it's like kind of one of my favorite chapters if I'm being honest. It's short but sweet. The beginning with the glitchy text on the screen, just a nice touch, nice little thing. It's not specified when in the timeline this happens, because like even in the other Bizarro sequences, as we're going to see, they tell us when it happened. So, I think that this most likely means that it didn't happen to anybody. Like, we don't know who this happened to either. So I think this didn't actually happen to anybody, even if it was in their heads. But it's just here to provide some context or some like metaphorical insight or foresight to the player. Other than that, the little TV and the clips are really like uneasy, unnerving. I ate it up, really. When I was playing it, I ate it up. It was one of the best parts, like physically playing it. Like watching it might be a little boring, but physically playing it, it was like one of my favorite parts for sure. More science fiction, sciencey stuff. Overall, one of my favorite chapters, even though it's like a 5-minute gameplay. Fading back in, the text 2 months after the crash appears on the screen. as the player is looking at a box that is filled to the brim with Dragon Breath mouthwash, the exact same mouthwash that was in the ad from the previous chapter. Jimmy explains that this is the entirety of the cargo that they've been hauling this entire time, only mouthwash, and this revelation is met with some reactions that you'd probably expect from learning this kind of information. The camera then pans up to reveal the sheer amount of mouthwash that they've been hauling this whole time. Jimmy questions why they would have 5 people hauling only mouthwash for over a year. Anya then explains that the sugar content in the mouthwash offsets any use it could have had as a disinfectant. So not only have they been hauling mouthwash this entire time, but it's also crappy mouthwash. Swansea then snatches the bottle out of Anya's hand as he realizes that it's 14% ethanol. He laughs maniacally as he takes a swig from the bottle, exclaiming that he just broke 15 years of sobriety. He cheers to Curly as Daisuke says that anyone could get hammered off of this stuff, but Jimmy interrupts saying that it'll also kill you in the process. Anya puts her face in her palms and Swansea asks Daisuke if anyone taught him how to drink like a man, when the screen gets grainy, ushering us to Chapter 6. Chapter 5, the big reveal. I liked the reveal. I thought it was good. I thought that they subverted expectations well. I like the transition from the ad into the reveal. I like the kind of moral conundrum that the crew is realizing that they're going to die over mouthwash. And then like the sugar content in the mouthwash, I think it kind of lends a hand towards the corrupt world back home again, you know. Maybe not fully, maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think it helps a little bit with the world building, if you ask me. And then the big character thing for this one was Swansea and us learning about his sobriety and breaking it. We'll see how that plays out. Anya breaks down at the end. She seems to do that a lot, but, rightfully so. Chapter ended pretty abruptly, but, another short chapter, but I still liked it, and I think it builds on well for the rest of the game. 6 days before the crash is displayed on the screen, along with the objective to break the news. Checking our inventory, we see the sheet of paper we received from corporate a few chapters ago, with the description reading, "After all these years, just like that," so we can safely assume that we're playing as Curly. We make our way up to the lounge when we open the door, and the entire rest of the crew is there with party hats on and decorations clapping and celebrating. It's a surprise party for Curly, but even he doesn't know why. He asks what the occasion is, to which they respond saying they only get one communal birthday per trip. Last trip they did Swansea's birthday, now it's Curly's turn. Now we're seeing the extent of Pony Express's tomfoolery here, because gelatin packet meals and docking pay for any mistake is one thing, but restricting the amount of birthday parties that the crew can have? Now that's pure evil. The player is then given the objective to bake the birthday cake, since the captain is the only one with permissions to all of the ingredients needed. Before baking the cake, though, there is optional dialogue with every character. Daisuke requests extra sweetener in the cake. Jimmy apologizes for startling Curly, but says that these parties are now tradition for the crew. And then Anya and Swansea's dialogue are just there to guide the player in the next upcoming gameplay section. After making the cake, Curly sits at the table with everyone, ready to cut it. The crew goads him into a speech until Jimmy notices something off with Curly. He asks what's wrong, and the screen fades to black for a second, before returning on Curly saying that's all it said on the report from management. So we can assume that the cutaway was Curly telling the crew about whatever the news from corporate is. Curly reassures them that they will still receive their paycheck for this delivery, but that's the extent of his knowledge on this. Swansea remarks that Pony Express is finally kicking the bucket. Anya says she doesn't have any savings before questioning if they're even allowed to do what they're doing. Swansea explains that Pony Express was actually one of the last manned crew freighter companies left, and that the writing's been on the wall for their assumed shutdown. Jimmy asks Curly when they told him this. He says they told him earlier in the week, and he was actually instructed to wait until they were closer to the end of their haul to tell the rest of the crew. But he couldn't keep something like that from them. Then Jimmy snaps, saying that Curly finally got what he wanted without all the guilt. He continues lamenting that he can go back to his so-called struggle of a life. Anya never got into medical school due to her incompetence, and Swansea's old and has been in the business for so long that he doesn't have many employment years left in him. But Daisuke, he'll be fine due to his parents' wealth. But Curly, he's headed for bigger and better things. As Curly interrupts, exclaiming that he's just working on his life being a better place, a place that he doesn't have to escape. Before Jimmy barges back in, slamming his fist on the table, referring back to their psych eval conversation, saying that the crew are the ones that he's trying to escape, and that Curly's now leaving the dirt behind now that his boots are clean. Curly claims that's not what he meant at all by it. Jimmy shuts this down, saying that he couldn't frame the situation in a way that makes Curly look like a hero, that makes him look good. He's abandoning the crew, but remaining the model captain. Curly and Daisuke stay silent. Swansea mutters that it's unbelievable, and Anya, now with her face in her hands, asks what she's supposed to do now. Jimmy then sarcastically suggests that they have some cake, giving props to the twilight cruise of the Tulpar and to the captain and his new prospects. The player is then prompted to grab the knife, as Curly cuts into it, deeper and deeper, before the screen fades to Chapter 7. Okay, Chapter 6 has some ups and downs. Pretty crazy chapter altogether, though. Starting off with the bad news that Pony Express is shutting down. Big hit for all of our characters. There's a lot, don't get me wrong, a lot of great character work again in this chapter. The thing that I don't like about this chapter is the horrible gameplay segment that I probably won't even put much of in the video. It's so boring, but it's just scanning the code and then putting in ingredients and then pressing a button over and over again. At that point, just why are we even including that? So, other than that, though, it was a good chapter. Pony Express shutting down and being one of the last manned freighter companies it lends itself again to my theory that that Earth isn't doing very good. We're back home. Jim takes this news very, very, very poorly, as we can see, showing his aggressiveness, which comes back a lot, slams the table, and even more resentment towards Curly that we saw earlier because of how successful he is, and then more of his belittling of the crew, which he just seems to do every single chapter. More references back to the psych eval, which is, such a great scene. I'm glad that they're really using it. The cake cutting segment is some more foreshadowing. We'll get into that, but they really do love foreshadowing in this game. Anya seems to have a poor financial situation. Other than the just horribly boring gameplay segment, the rest of it, if this game was just a movie, it would be great, if you ask me. But, hey, great chapter. We start with Jimmy waking up to sounds of painful groaning and writhing in a nearby room as the text 3 months after the crash flashes on the screen. The player gets up from sleeping in the lounge with the other crew members' bedrolls nearby, so we can assume the sleeping quarters were damaged in the crash. Daisuke is still asleep as we're given the objective to check on Curly. Walking to the medbay, we see that the entire lounge is riddled with empty cargo boxes and mouthwash containers, and the place is just generally more messy than it was before. Arriving at the medbay, we see Curly clearly in immense pain, more than he's usually in. Groaning and weeping, inspecting him tells us that he hasn't been administered his meds yet, prompting us to find Anya. Stopping by the cargo hold before finding Anya, we can see more empty boxes and mouthwash. We can find Anya and Swansea talking in the cockpit in the middle of a conversation. They ask Jimmy if he's not able to sleep either as he questions them as to why they're talking this late. In the middle of the conversation, though, Anya covers her eyes and looks away. Jimmy notices this, asking if she's crying, but she insists that she's fine. Jimmy tells Anya and Curly that they have to keep it together, then asks Anya if she gave Curly his meds yet. She says it must have slipped her mind and that she'll do it right now, but once again, Jimmy offers to do it, and you guessed it, in a very rude manner. The player is then given the objective to give Curly his painkillers. Talking to Swansea after this shows him still holding his fire axe, leading Jimmy to ask him about it, to which Swansea says it's a force of habit and there's nothing to worry about. And talking to Anya shows her and Jimmy pondering over how or when they could get rescued by another ship. Back with Curly, Jimmy confides in him, explaining that he knows what everyone is thinking, and that he knows that they don't trust him as a leader. But then we get some mysterious dialogue. Jimmy saying, "What would I even say? And what would she do?" followed by silence. Jimmy then sarcastically thanks Curly for putting him in the driver's seat. When picking up the painkillers, Jimmy says that there's only a few left, and soon they won't have anything to keep Curly quiet. Jimmy then tells him to open up, before very kindly remarking that he hopes they make him feel better. Administering the painkillers is just as messed up as the last time. Manually opening the mouth, then the horrifying audio segment of Curly trying to push them down. Jimmy then gets up to leave the medbay as the player's screen freezes and the audio glitches, ushering us to Chapter 8. I love Curly, man. Favorite part of this chapter is just like Curly looming over the whole thing, making noise in the background. It's awesome to me the body horror is so cool. The conversation that we walk in on plants some seeds there, especially when Anya starts crying. Running out of painkillers, not good, not good. That is going to hurt. What else? I like some of the little touches, like as you get closer to giving Curly his medication, he gets louder and louder. And then again, the cursor, the eye following the cursor, it's awesome. We see a little bit more of Jimmy's like paranoia from the crew, not trusting him, and then that ties back into his jealousy for Curly. You know, that whole monologue there with him, really well written. The audio when you give him the meds, it's just perfect. It's perfect. It's like so unnerving. I love it. And then another little thing, a little touch, is the empty boxes and mouthwash bottles all around the lounge and the cargo hold. Seeing our group kind of fade into some bad things here. So good chapter. Upon loading in, we see Take Responsibility in scrambled letters once again on the screen, with post-crash Curly in the foreground, sitting at the lounge table with his cake in front of him. Looking around the lounge, we see mounds and mounds of empty mouthwash bottles strewn across the room, even blocking some of the doorways, and the big display screen now depicts an emergency warning. Sitting down in front of Curly, he suggests that we should have some of the cake. Jimmy says there's no point since the cake is mediocre at best, to which Curly replies saying, sometimes you can only get the subpar stuff, and that's what makes the really good stuff good at all. Jimmy then asks why they're even bothering with this cake. Curly says that they all tried to escape, and it didn't work out for any of them. Curly continues explaining that he's thought so many times if this is what peace really feels like, and if it's good enough. He says that if he's being honest, it isn't the best. Then repeating what he said in their argument, he reiterates that all he can do is try and make his life one he's not trying to run from all the time. That sometimes he'll be promoted, buy a house, fall in love, but other times he'll just have some awful cake with his friend, and that right now, that seems pretty brilliant. Curly asks Jimmy to do the honors, prompting the player to find something to cut the cake with. On our way to grab something sharp, we see that most of the ship is covered with these empty mouthwash bottles that we saw in the lounge, as well as more insulation foam than before. Arriving at the cockpit, we see the fire axe lodged in the headrest of Jimmy's chair, with blood splattered all over. Red eyeballs taking up all of the monitor screens in the cockpit, watching our every move. Picking up the axe, we're given the objective to feast. Making our way back to the lounge, some music starts rolling in, and at first it's pretty ominous and nerve-wracking, but as we get closer to the lounge, it becomes kind of liminal, almost angelic, as if we're not in the weirdest situation imaginable. Right when we walk through the entrance to the lounge, the music abruptly cuts off, and instead of the emergency warning on the display screen, there's now a giant eyeball tracking our every move. Back to the table, the cake is now gone, and in its spot is Curly laying down. Pulling up our inventory, Jimmy equips the fire axe, and as we begin to swing it down onto Curly, the audio and video distorts as we're on to Chapter 9. Okay, firstly, the wiki actually does not consider this chapter a chapter. They kind of just call it a Pizarro sequence, which that is what it is. But, I just wanted to consider it a chapter because, avoid some confusion. I like this chapter, though. It's weird. It's like very symbolistic in a lot of ways. Curly's monologue, how he's musing over building a life that he doesn't feel like running away from. Calling back to chapter 6, I really love the writing for that dialogue. Talking about how mediocre experiences make the really good ones great. The segment where we go and find something to cut the cake with, where we're walking to the cockpit, and it's just the ship is ravaged. There's a lot more empty bottles. There's a lot more foam. I really like the world building there. And then when we get to the cockpit, we actually see that the axe is lodged in Jimmy's chair. I think there's something there, and I'm not gonna get into it now. I'll probably get into it at the end of the video, but I think there's something more there to that. But yeah, and the eyeballs in the monitors is some of the first parts we see with Curly's one eyeball kind of becoming a bigger part, more symbolism in there. We haven't really seen that too much other than the cursor following. So yeah, that's going to reoccur a lot. I also like when you pick up the axe and it gives you the feast objective. I like that a lot. I really like how this game utilizes its interface, that like a lot of other games won't do that. You know, they'll rinse and repeat the same objective things, but this one, it utilizes everything to its full capacity to make you more horrified, and I really like that. Getting back to the table, you know, seeing that it's now Curly instead of the cake, and then going to chop him up, amazing, love it. Oh, the music when you're walking back, like it starts off and I was like pooping my pants. I was so scared, and then it's like angelic after that. It's like I'm hopeful walking back to this burn victim about to kill him. I don't know. It's rude. I liked it a lot. 4 months after the crash is displayed on the screen as Jimmy stands in the cargo hold looking out at the sea of boxes. We're given the objective to check on the crew as we make our way out to the hallway. Daisuke is laying face first on the ground with a bottle of mouthwash in his hand. Jimmy asks him how many he's had, remarking that they'll kill him, before Daisuke interrupts, lamenting that his mom found him this internship due to his laziness, but Daisuke says he just never knew what he wanted to be, and that he was never good at anything, a total screw-up. Jimmy reassures him that they're not done yet. He responds, simply saying that he hopes his mom doesn't blame herself for his death, before telling Jimmy to take the bottle away. Making our way to the lounge, we see Swansea hitting a nefarious jig in front of the sunset display screen, while still holding the axe. Talking to Swansea, it's pretty clear that he's drunk, calling Jimmy Jimbo and drunkenly singing along to his tunes. Jimmy then calls him a mess, to which Swansea responds saying that it'll be all the sad members of the Tulpar in the sky with diamonds. He continues, remarking that Captain Jimmy's pulling the plug on the party early. On our way to see Anya, we see the Polly statue is now dismembered and lying lifeless on the ground, most likely Swansea's doing. Talking to Anya at the table, we see her holding a bottle of mouthwash, staring at it intently. As the dialogue begins, Anya's startled by Jimmy. He apologizes and asks her if she's thinking about drinking it. She says yeah, but it'd probably just make her sick, wouldn't fix anything, as much as she'd like it to. She then tells Jimmy that not all of the medicine aboard was in her office, and that some of it was stored in a depot locker in the hallway. Jimmy asks why she hadn't brought this up sooner. She says that it's been foamed up, but she's been estimating the position of the foam and thinks that it's not too far into the mass, so they could try and break it out with an axe. Jimmy says it's risky, but if nothing else, it'd be an excuse to get Swansea to hand over the axe. Confronting Swansea, Jimmy asks him for the axe. Swansea responds saying that the axe was entrusted to him by Curly and that is his responsibility. He then remarks that Jimmy knows a lot about responsibility, doesn't he? Jimmy says that he needs it to get more painkillers, that he's actually trying to be useful here, but Swansea thinks that taking the axe to the foam would kill them all. He then says that Jimmy's trying to take matters into his own hands, conceding for Jimmy to be his guest as he turns around and swings the axe into the display screen, shattering it and lodging the axe into it. Swansea sits down as the player is prompted to grab the axe. Jimmy hacks away at the foam and eventually retrieves the painkillers and some isopropyl alcohol. Turning to Anya, she's overjoyed, saying, "Oh wow, Jimmy, you did it. You were amazing." Perhaps a little too overly nice to Jimmy. Anya then asks Jimmy if he could give Curly his painkillers again. But Jimmy snaps, saying she can't be serious, and that he's entertained her sentimentality up until now, but he's actually trying to fix things here. As "take responsibility and take care of it" flash on the screen, Jimmy continues, saying he's getting them through this. He then rants about how he has to fix everything and how everyone commands him to do their own jobs, even though he's the captain. As the player's interface reflects each prompt, but he's bearing it, because he has to, because the captain has to take responsibility of his ship. Take responsibility and take care of it flash once again as Anya apologizes, offering to give Curly his meds, and Jimmy once again gets pissy and shuts her down, saying he'll take care of it, like he always does. Jimmy enters the med bay and confides in Curly again, explaining that he didn't understand the pressure he was under before as captain, and that Curly tried to tell him that it's not all it's cracked up to be, before repeating the quote from earlier, "Our worst moments don't make us monsters." He then tells Curly he was a good captain, and that he will be one again someday, ending the dialogue by telling Curly he's gonna fix this. Jimmy administers the painkillers, and it's followed once again by another gut-wrenching audio sequence. It seems that with every batch he swallows, it sounds less painful and more sorrowful. Completing our task freezes the screen again as we enter Chapter 10. Alright, Daisuke trashed off the mouthwash. You gotta feel for the guy. You know, he's just a kid that got an internship on a ship, you know, first job. And, you know, his little talk with Jimmy, you gotta relate. Everybody can relate to him a little bit, and it sucks. You gotta feel for him. Moving out into the lounge, Swansea's jamming. And then the thing here that gets me is Jimmy startling Anya, and I feel like this happens so often, and it just shows that she's afraid of him, and we'll see why as we go on. But I really like how they plant these in early. Swansea also trashed off the mouthwash, has his little fit, lodges the axe in the screen. Jimmy goes and gets the painkillers, and then that little talk with him and Anya again. He's just so mean, bro. He is such an a-hole. Like, talking about how he's always the one fixing things. Like, he hasn't done anything, bro. He hasn't done nothing. And it's like, it just shows how big his ego is. And, you know, you'd think that that's why Anya is afraid of him, but, you know, something else might happen. Who knows? And it's just like the character work there, and the character work with Daisuke is really, really good. And I love what they do with it. Talk with Curly, more character progression for Jimmy. You know, most players by now hate him, but you know, you can feel for him a little bit. You know, he's thrown into this job, even though it seems like he was mean before that. But you know, you got to feel for him a little bit, and you got to feel for Curly as well. Again, with the interface. Now, this is like so cool as he's listing off the different objectives we've already done that they've thrown onto him. It pops up on the interface again. So such a cool usage of the interface there. And then we get flashes of take responsibility and take care of it. You know, that continues throughout. We've seen that already, and it continues, and that's a really nice touch as well. You know, we see the mouthwash bottles are growing, the boxes are growing. You know, good world building. So yeah, it's a pretty solid chapter. Fading in 6 hours until judgment appears on the screen. As we're locked in an interaction with the cockpit door. You have to lock the door, and once we do, we see Swansea yell for Jimmy to get out of the cockpit as he slams on the door over and over again. Intense music abruptly plays as we look around for something to block the door with. Eventually we find some rope. Just as we pick it up though, Swansea yells, "You can't hide." If we check our inventory, we see there's a ball of static with question marks as its name, its description reading, "My hands won't stop shaking." Looking more, we find a metal pipe. This time, when we pick it up, Swansea threatens to chop Jimmy to pieces. Jimmy then uses the pipe and the rope to bar the door. As he does, Swansea shatters the glass on the door with his axe and reaches to unlock it as we fade out and into Chapter 11. A short chapter, but important chapter. In the now, though, why is Swansea after Jimmy? That's the question here, and another kind of food for thought thing for the rest of the game. But we also know it's a Bizarro sequence based off of the text being read. You know, it has the same mannerisms as the other ones. So, you know, it could be a Bizarro sequence. They could be fooling us. Who knows? The ball of static thing, I guess. I mean, it's a cool little thing, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah, short chapter, but I think it's important. So, yeah. 2 days before the crash is on the screen as we return with Curly and Anya sitting in front of the lounge display screen as it depicts a cloudy moonlit night. Curly asks Anya if she's doing okay. She says she can't sleep. Curly expresses how he relates to that. Anya then says she actually likes the nighttime window screen, and that if you look really closely, you can see a dead pixel in the upper right-hand corner. Curly says he can't see it. Anya explains that it's always there in the back of her mind, and Curly, perhaps a little less profound, says it's going to drive him crazy looking for it. Curly says despite it being there, he doesn't think the dead pixel ruins the illusion, and that it's still peaceful. Then again, he is used to looking at the bigger picture. Anya asks how many days of transport they have left. Curly responds with around 237 days, just under 8 months. Anya then asks Curly what he thinks of Pony Express putting a lock on the medical room door, but not the sleeping quarters. He says he supposes it's for the same reason that they put a lock on the cockpit. Safety. Just then, Safety flashes on the screen just as Take Responsibility did for Jimmy, and the screen transitions to the next chapter. Now, this is another one of my favorite chapters in the entire game. I just love this dynamic between Curly and Anya. At first, kind of think it's more of just an employee-employer type, like regular relationship, but then you get to this chapter and it's like so much more. It really reflects even more Jimmy and Curly, because, you know, Anya is afraid of Jimmy, she's afraid of defying him, and then you have Curly, who has more power than Jimmy, but still has a better relationship with everybody on the ship, including Anya. The dead pixel conversation is so well done. It connects to Curly's character flaw, always having to look at the bigger picture, and subsequently kind of ignoring a lot of things that he wouldn't consider important, little signs from the other characters that he wouldn't consider to be important, but turns out to be a bigger problem as we get on with the game. And it's just a beautiful way to reflect that. Anya ponders about the locks on the doors, and it kind of seems like a passing comment right now, but it will be important later, trust me. And then there's another little tidbit here where Curly actually says cheers, which is obviously like British slang, and that's because originally Curly was supposed to be British, and then they kind of cut that, but they kept some of his dialogue from then. So he still says cheers sometimes in the dialogue, still has some British slang in it. We're in the lounge with 5 months after the crash displayed on the screen. After walking around for a moment, Daisuke comes running in, yelling for Jimmy's help. He says that it's a total emergency. Anya is stuck in the med bay, and the door is jammed. Jimmy says he'll have a look as they make their way to the door. Jimmy and Daisuke arrive, and the first thing that Jimmy does is ask Anya if the lock is broken. But he's met with silence. He asks if she can hear him, and she responds saying she can. Jimmy says the rest of their medicine is stuck in the med bay with her, and that this could get ugly if they can't get it out. Daisuke asks if there's any wrenches laying around, and Jimmy asks if she really put her back into it when trying to open the door. But they're again met with no reply. Jimmy reiterates asking if the door is really stuck. Anya answers no. Daisuke's confused, and Jimmy says that everyone's stressed right now, but she can't go breaking down at every little hardship, and that she needs to open the damn door. I know I keep saying this, but this guy really is a dick. Anya says that Jimmy was right all along, and that she should have done this from the beginning. She says that she always believed that our worst moments didn't define us, make us beyond repair. She continues asking Jimmy if he thought that this is what she wanted, telling him to make no mistake, this isn't her worst moment. It's the best decision she'll ever make. Jimmy tells her to open the door again. She says she'll take care of it. As Daisuke bangs on the door, asking her what that means, Jimmy says that Curly's still in there with her, implying that Anya could do something to him. Jimmy asks Daisuke if there's any other way into medical. He says that Swansea said it was super duper mega off limits, but the busted vent in the utility room leads into the vent in the med bay. Jimmy says they'll make it work, as we're given the objective to head to utility. Arriving at utility, Swansea is sitting outside the door, seemingly guarding it. Daisuke tells him that we need his help, and that they need to get into utility despite him deeming it dangerous. Swansea says he's good where he's at, and that he's not letting anyone in. Jimmy asks if there's any way. Swansea says that letting him scratch at a foam wall would be useless, and that he'd probably just end up tearing the ship open anyway. Daisuke reiterates that the situation is dire, and asks him to just hear them out. Swansea then goes on a rant about how they're God's hand-picked favorites on this planet, and that since he's the happiest man on Wake Rock, nothing going on anywhere else is his problem. Jimmy tells Daisuke there's no point in trying with him, and they should just go. But just then, the screen freezes once more, transitioning us into Chapter 13. Alright, I feel like this chapter is largely a transitional chapter, but it's still got some stuff in it, like Anya lying about locking herself in. I think when Jimmy first addresses her through the door, I think he already knows that she's locked herself in. He's way too nonchalant about it. I think he already knows at this point. And then, eventually he gets it out of her, and she says some suspicious stuff like it's the best decision she'll ever make, and that she'll take care of it, which, sounds like self-harm, right? That's what you'd assume. But then Jimmy being Jimmy, he belittles her more, just what he does, I guess, and then uses this to manipulate Daisuke. Really, that's what I think. Like, maybe you can make an argument that he really didn't know and that he really thought she was going to hurt Curly, but I think he knew that what she was saying was more self-harm, and he uses this to manipulate Daisuke into helping them because he's young, he doesn't know what's going on, and he's using him, and it's terrible. It's like, this guy is horrible, and then we get to Swansea and he's still drunk out of his mind and everything. So yeah, like I said, I think it's more of a transitional chapter for the next chapter, but nevertheless they set everything up well. So yeah, 8 hours till judgment is displayed on the screen. Jimmy yells to not do anything, to stop, that he can fix this. Swansea sarcastically asks why he keeps saying that, as Daisuke groans and writhes in pain, weakly saying that he's sorry. Swansea asks about the isopropyl alcohol from the medical stash. Jimmy says the cocktail, Swansea snaps, screaming about the cocktail, asking him what he's talking about. Jimmy then pushes the blame on Swansea, saying it was all his fault. He wouldn't have ever let them into utility. He forced his hand. Swansea slams his fist into the wall, yelling at Jimmy, calling him a useless idiot, before saying that there must be something else to help him, as the interface tells us to find disinfectant. Making our way to the medbay, as we walk in, the entire left side of the room, including Curly on the stretcher, is incredibly grainy, a mess of blur. Swansea's already here, and when interacting with him, he'll yell at Jimmy, saying he's already looking here and that Jimmy could at least try to make himself useful. Inspecting the vent, we see a blood trail leading from it out to the lounge, along with Jimmy saying, at least he made it out to the other side, we can still help him. As we traverse the Tulpar looking for disinfectant, the player attempts to go towards the utility room. You're hit with take responsibility and take care of it on the screen once more, and your position is reset to the hallway entrance. Heading through the hallway, instead of the entrance to the cargo hold, there's a gravestone with a hibiscus flower, like the ones on Daisuke's shirt, resting on it, blocking the way. But when we use our code scanner on it, the doorway and a trail of blood is revealed to us. As the entrance is revealed to us, we can see that it isn't the normal cargo hold we've seen, but instead a steep stairway down into the darkness. Take responsibility flashes on screen again as we make our way down. Turning around, we see the path back up is now blocked by another set of stairs, along with the lights turned on, revealing all the giant shelves tipped over on themselves. Following the steps down, we hear Polly in the distance say, Polly says, followed by a deep, monstrous shriek, echoing throughout. Eventually, Be Quiet flashes on the screen as we're now teleported to a catwalk above all the shelves and boxes. There's a notepad resting on a box in front of you reading, a blind beast, aimless and restless, you can't run from it. Now this is the start of a gameplay section. The Be Quiet text serves as instructions to navigate this segment, as our footsteps when walking along the catwalk are very loud, and sprinting alerts what I can only describe as a giant mutated poly creature that you can only see when you're very close to it and scanning it with the light of the sensor. Running causes the sea of boxes under you to ripple and bolt closer to you, so you have to walk to your destination. That destination being a pile of boxes with a little poly statue on top holding a bottle of mouthwash. Picking it up flashes take responsibility and take care of it once more, and teleports us back to Daisuke in the lounge of the Tulpar. Before Jimmy uses the mouthwash as a disinfectant, Daisuke says he's sorry once more and that he messed up. Jimmy tells him not to talk, as the screen fades to black and we hear the audio of Jimmy pouring the mouthwash on Daisuke's wounds. Marking the end of Chapter 13. Alright, this chapter is very interesting because it might be the only one, but it's definitely one of the only chapters that mix the reality and the bizarro stuff, because most of the other chapters it's it's obvious that what's happening is either something that actually happened or a dream bizarro sequence. You can tell by the text and everything and just what happens, but in this one, you start off and it's this could be something that actually happened, and then you get and it's that definitely didn't happen in the cargo hold. So it's that's really interesting, and I think that is the case. I think that part of this stuff did happen and then part of it didn't. The opening is really good. You're shocked Daisuke's hurt, what happened. You get some good character stuff between Jimmy and Swansea. Jimmy reiterating over and over again that he can fix it. He keeps doing it, and then he really just sucks and he can't do anything. And then Swansea brings that up, and he gets angry like he usually does. And it's that's what their characters do, and it's good to see that they're staying in it. With Jimmy pinning the blame on Swansea, again, more stuff that he does a lot. Getting into the medical room. This part is really cool once you know the context later on. With the blurry mess in there, you kind of just like when you're playing it at first, you just assume that it's some more weird stuff that the devs are doing because there's a lot of weird stuff, but there's a reason, and I really like how they depicted this, and we'll get to it later. But yeah, I think this is a really great way of depicting what they wanted to do. What else? The gravestone was a cool touch with the little hibiscus flower. I like that. The entire setting of the cargo hold is really cool and eerie, and then you get that giant poly monster, and you can only see it with the code scanner. I don't know. Cool, though. It looks awesome, and it sounds awesome. It sounds so cool. Like I said, the sound design for, like, everything in this game is so unique and well done. Also, like the parallel between Curly and Daisuke when Curly takes his meds and Daisuke getting the mouthwash. So, yeah, solid chapter for sure. Back with a healthy Daisuke 5 months after the crash is displayed on the screen. Daisuke reiterates how the vent and utility leads into medical, but breaking the foam could risk the air seal, and that he just doesn't want to mess up anything anymore. Jimmy says that he heard Anya, she could do something extreme right now, and that him and Daisuke are the only ones who can save Curly. He says if Swansea won't help, then they'll just figure it out themselves. And Daisuke agrees, but asks how they'll even get into utility, let alone break away the foam safely, given Swansea practically camps outside the door, plus he has the key. Jimmy says that they need to knock him out, by making him pass out, due to alcohol. He says it's simple and safe, and that he might not even realize they did it. He says there's a recipe for a mocktail in the kitchen, but they'll alter the recipe to add a little kick. In the lounge, we check the recipe for the mocktail, and instead of mixing water and tonic, then adding sweetener, we'll mix mouthwash and isopropyl alcohol, and then add sweetener. Jimmy mixes the alcohol and mouthwash, but the food dispenser is all foamed up, there's no sweetener around. Asking Daisuke about the sweetener, he says that he may have possibly misplaced a few packets before, by accident of course, and that they might be in his stuff, but who knows, anything could be possible, it could be anywhere. The crash sure did jumble things up. Mixing the sweetener from Daisuke's bedroll and the mocktail, Jimmy now has his concoction. Jimmy offers Swansea the cocktail, basically making it out to be a peace offering of sorts. He takes it, Daisuke says they freestyled the recipe a bit, Swansea says he isn't a mixologist, and he damn sure isn't an engineer. He then goes on a signature Swansea rant here, telling Daisuke he never should have come here, asking who even decided to let him on board, stick the idiot with a bunch of sad sack adults, and see what he learns. He continues lamenting that pulling yourself up by the bootstraps doesn't actually work, and that you think it's all going somewhere, but every failure leaves you a little more mangled than before. Older, uglier, meaner, smarter in a worse way. Jimmy tells Swansea that wallowing doesn't suit him, to which Swansea responds, remarking that they should all be just like Jimmy then, huh? The hard-working, esteemed captain. Ending his very sad tirade, he says that they should take a load off before the sun sets on their party, and may they never go to hell, but always be on their way. The screen fades to black as we hear a loud thud. Fading back in, Swansea's on the ground, as we're prompted to retrieve the utility key. Daisuke in a panic asks if Swansea's okay. Jimmy says he'll be fine, that he'll just have a massive headache whenever he wakes up. Jimmy turns the key to open the door, but right before he opens it, Daisuke gets second thoughts, asking Jimmy if they should really be doing this, suggesting that they should wait for Swansea to wake up first. Jimmy replies saying it's time to be brave and that Curly and Anya are counting on them. The door opens, and to Jimmy and Daisuke's surprise, there's not much foam at all. Inspecting the room further, we see that all of the cryostasis pods are foamed up, except for one. Daisuke says he can't believe Swansea was able to clear all that foam by himself, but Jimmy has a different theory. Jimmy tells Daisuke to think. Why would Swansea never let him break the foam away in utility? Or why he'd never told him that he actually got past the foam wall? Because there was never any foam here to begin with. Swansea knew all along that boozed up bastard was biding his time until he could save himself. Daisuke asks if the pod really meant he'd get rescued. Jimmy says you'd get 20 more years of a chance to get found, and that he'd take those odds any day, but not by lying through his teeth while he waits for everyone else to die. Daisuke denies all of it, but Jimmy doesn't care anymore, as they just have to focus on their mission at hand. Turning their attention to the vent, it's still in one piece, but there's wires hanging out and sparks flying everywhere. Jimmy says it could have collapsed in some places, but Daisuke needs to try and make it through nevertheless. Daisuke says it's not safe and that they should just wait for Swansea to wake back up before they do anything. Jimmy's not having it though, remarking that Daisuke said he could handle this, that Swansea taught him well and it's time to prove himself to the rest of the crew. Besides, Swansea will be impressed when he wakes up, proud of him even. He continues saying that Swansea will understand why they had to do it, and that everyone is counting on him. Daisuke crawls into the vent, but he doesn't get far when the lights go out and we hear him screaming in pain. He continues shuffling through the vent, groaning as he crawls until he gets into medical. And the last thing we hear before the end of the chapter is Daisuke asking Anya, "What did you do?" Alright, chapter 14. First thing I want to talk about is how great this game is at like throwing in little world building and character development notes into like these little situations that they didn't have to be there, like with Jimmy and Daisuke making the cocktail and then finding out that Daisuke is hiding the sweetener. It's a nice little touch. They didn't have to do that, but they did, and it makes the characters better. Then we get to Jimmy and Daisuke talking to Swansea, and he's drunk and he goes on another one of his rants, and it's really well written again. It's just him talking about the misery of his life at the machine that is Pony Express, and I think it really builds up the character of Pony Express, I guess you could say, like how I've been talking about this whole time, how I feel like it's probably pretty bad back home, and I feel like it builds the world a lot more with that as well. We get to Daisuke and Jimmy talking in the in utility right before he gets in the vent, and it's just Jimmy being stupid again, and it's crazy. He just manipulates everyone, man, and he's using. I feel so bad for Daisuke. Jimmy uses his mentor in Swansea, who he clearly looks up to some extent, and he looks for his approval and tells him that he'll be proud if he does this to get him to go into the vent. It's terrible, but really good writing. And then the ending. What did you do to Anya? And it leaves some doors open. Could be talking about Curly, could be talking about herself. So who knows? Let's see. I never know how to end these things. Turning in the med bay, one day before the crash is displayed on the screen. The objective to find the gun. Looking around the med bay, we see a very important piece of information to this chapter. That, of course, being a sticky note with an interesting little guy on it named Yumpy. I don't know why he's here, but I'm glad he is. Hello everyone, Editing Bobby here, and it turns out that the Yimpy sticky note is actually a drawing of Jimmy made by Daisuke. So, do with that what you will. In the cockpit, we find Anya fallen to the ground on her knees. Curly asks her where it is before saying that the crew being let go, confirming the news from corporate, isn't a reason to hurt herself. He continues saying that Anya never received psyche evals and she was the one conducting them, and that he should have thought of that. Curly comforts her, saying that she could have come to him at any time if she was feeling stressed. She responds asking what he could have done anyway. He says anything. He goes on saying that the crew is his responsibility. She cuts him off, exclaiming that she's not going to hurt herself. She couldn't even get the safety case open if she wanted to, but that she did hide it. Curly asks her to tell him where it is, offering that all this can be left off the performance log and that they'll figure it out together. Anya responds with a bombshell. "I'm pregnant," she says. Curly can't believe it. He asks, "Who would you," as he realizes. Anya says she told him. Curly reassures that they can fix this, that he's known him for a long time. He can talk to him. Anya ignores him, saying she knew he'd never give her the gun to protect herself, so the least she could do to make sure he never got to it either. Before we leave the cockpit, inspecting the navigation computer gives us a warning that there's some abnormal asteroid trajectories along our route, and that course corrections may be needed, foreshadowing the very beginning of the game. As we try to leave the cockpit, the screen freezes, transitioning us to Chapter 16. Now this is probably the most important chapter in the entire game, as you could probably assume. But this twist, this chapter is just so masterfully crafted, man. Like, you get to this part, and it just ties in everything, when Anya says that she's pregnant, and then you kind of assume, right? You assume what you think it is. But then, she says, like, "The captain I told you," says that line, and it's like, you think back to when, all those times when, Anya told Curly that she felt uncomfortable around somebody, expressing her worries about being around him, or like the little line where it's like, "Why is there no locks on the bedroom quarters, but there is on the other places?" And it's like, at the time they feel like kind of passing comments, but then you get to this point and you're like, it all meant something. And obviously it confirms that Jimmy sexually assaulted her, and it's just such a amazingly well written part. It's tasteful. It's not, over the top in any way. They didn't have to show it to make the impact feel felt, at least for me. And it was just a great tie into everything. And even beyond Anya's character and her callbacks and complaints, also to Curly's character, when we look back on some other stuff, like the conversation they had about the dead pixel, where, Curly overlooks the small things for the big picture a lot of the time, just like how he would overlook her complaining about the locks, complaining about not feeling safe around Jimmy, and complaining about all these things about Jimmy. These small complaints that he saw were these little minuscule things. To look at the bigger picture, to look at the bigger picture of, getting the freighter done, getting the load done, getting all these things around the ship done, getting the psyche valves done. He looks past these things, and it finally comes back to bite him. And it's just done so well. It's done perfectly. I absolutely love how they did this twist, and it's like you could see it coming, but it's still so effective. And like I said, they didn't have to have a scene of the sexual assault to make it feel this effective. And it was even obvious, and it was still very effective and impactful. Amazing chapter. Great chapter. Back with injured Daisuke, 6 hours until judgment is on the screen. Jimmy says the bleeding won't stop, and he just needs some time to think. Swansea asks if Daisuke can hear him. He starts to cough as Swansea begins to lift the axe over his head. Jimmy tries to tell Swansea to stop, but Swansea isn't fazed. He tells Daisuke to calm down and that it's alright. That in this line of work, he could have never became like miserable old Swansea. Decades of working for Pony Express, and this is where it got him. He laments, telling Daisuke he thought he was dumber than a can of paint, always talking, a useless ray of sunshine, not an ace student, career workhorse, or force of ambition, just a good kid trying his best. That he could have taught someone like Swansea a lot. He tells him to close his eyes as he raises the axe up, Daisuke's breathing getting more and more panicked, and plants it into his head. The scene goes silent. Jimmy calls Swansea a monster. He says he could have fixed things, that he has to do everything himself. Swansea asks him how he still doesn't understand. He says it's over. Daisuke won't have to suffer any longer because of Jimmy's delusions. Jimmy brings up utility, telling Swansea to stop pretending he knows about his plan, that he put something in Anya's head and killed Daisuke because he's trying to make sure he's the one that gets the cryopod. Swansea says he sure did talk to Anya, but it was her telling him all sorts of things instead. Jimmy goes silent. Swansea continues, saying that the captain should go down with his ship, but it doesn't matter anymore. He's got no place to be, and everything he could ever want is right here on the Tulpar. He tells Jimmy he can go ahead and get in pod if he wants. If they ever get found, he can tell them whatever story he'd like. Green briefly fades to black before returning with the objective to get the gun. Venturing to the medbay, we open the door as we're hit with an unexpected sight. There's Curly on his stretcher, like always, except now, Anya's dead body is sitting at his bedside. Getting closer, we see that she overdosed on Curly's painkillers. The gun case is sitting in a drawer under Curly's bed. As Jimmy opens it and retrieves the pistol, Curly lets out a dry, grim laugh at the situation that they've found themselves in. Once Jimmy turns around and opens the door, however, Swansea is standing at the end of the hall, yelling his name before the chapter abruptly ends. Another pivotal chapter here. This is the pinnacle, the culmination of all of Swansea and Daisuke's relationship for sure. This part with him, with Daisuke's little speech to him about how he could have never became like him in this industry, this miserable old guy that's just been working his entire life. It was really, really great. And then on top of that, there's even more stuff between Jimmy and Swansea. Swansea kind of snapping a little bit more than he usually does here, saying that him killing Daisuke, putting him out of his misery so that Jimmy couldn't hurt him anymore with his delusions. Absolutely perfect display of what Jimmy does. That's an amazing way to put it. The conversation about how Jimmy found the cryopod, like that part was really interesting to me too. I'm not sure really if I kind of debate in my mind what Swansea's motivations were with the cryopod, but I tend to lean that he wasn't doing it to be selfish, because like what would he why would he do that, you know? Like, what are his motivations there? He clearly took a liking to Anya and to Daisuke, and I think the conclusion that I've come to be the most realistic is that he was trying to clear them all off before showing anybody, especially before showing Jimmy, because he would have been the guy to do a selfish act and then kill everybody else to get it, you know? So, and that convo plays off their personalities really well. And then the biggest part of this chapter, if you ask me, the most interesting part, is walking in to Anya's dead body, because of the way that they portray this part. It's really interesting to me because, when we walk in, we see it, you're surprised at first, but then you're like, we haven't seen Anya in the present day sections in so long, and this is why. But it's the way that they do this reveal that is really, really interesting to me, because it's as if Jimmy just doesn't care at all. When he walks in, it's like you're walking into any other room ever. Like he has no reaction. It's almost as if he doesn't care at all, or like he's ignoring it. And it explains why that spot was blurry in the previous gameplay segment there, because his mind is trying to block it out because it was his fault, right? That's how I perceived it. And I thought that was a really cool way of implementing that. But there's also other things, like with the interface, that makes you believe that too, like how they set up the reveal as well. It makes you feel like it had no effect on him, or like it is affecting him heavily, like he's trying to ignore it. But you don't even get a gameplay option to inspect her body, which is like, you get to do that with everybody else, with anything else that's like even slightly important. You can click on it and get a dialogue, something. Can't do anything. It's like he's completely ignoring it. And it's clear that she's been dead there for a while, and Jimmy hasn't even bothered to move or cover up the body, just letting it stay there. It's a really cool way to reinforce Jimmy's careless and cold and apathetic attitude towards Anya and her death, in my opinion. I mean, getting past that, I think that was the biggest climax, despite the ending, with Swansea yelling his name. I think that was the climax of the chapter, and I think there was some really cool stuff done there. 2 days before the crash appears on the screen, as we walk into the med bay, we see Anya on her knees, clearly in distress. She says, "I told him." Curly responds, telling her she should have waited for him, then asks what he said. Anya says nothing that would make any difference, to which Curly asks if he was angry and where he went after. She says he just walked away, then voices her concerns once again, reiterating that she doesn't want him around anymore. But Curly interrupts her, telling her to hold on and that he just needs to find Jimmy and then he'll make everything okay. But Anya has nothing to say. As we make our way to Jimmy, the music intensifies and distorts into this awful, inaudible, wrenching noise. When we get to Jimmy, the sound fades out as Curly tells him that they can fix this. Jimmy asks him what he thinks will happen when they get back. Curly reiterates that they can figure this all out, as "take care of it" and "kills 99% flashes on the screen. Jimmy says that all he ever hears about is how great of a leader Curly is and how much it annoys him, but what will happen when they get back? Curly tries to interrupt, saying that they can fix it again, but Jimmy continues, saying that everything he and Curly have worked for their entire lives, none of it will matter. Curly tries to talk Jimmy down, saying he's gotten out of difficult situations before, and this time won't be any different. Jimmy ignores him again, though, remarking that it isn't just him, though. That Curly was supposed to be the one who had everything under control. Hell, he said it himself. The ship, the crew, everything that happened on the Tulpar, it was all his responsibility. He continues, saying that this is what Curly will be hearing for the rest of his life, as "take care of it" and "take responsibility" flash on the screen. Then Jimmy proposes something. This can all be remembered as a tragedy. Despite the best efforts of its acclaimed captain, the Tulpar crew was never found. No one survived to tell the tale. The words flash on screen again, but this time after the flash, we get our first look at Curly before the crash. Jimmy says you're standing at the top, feet in cement, that he gets it now. Jimmy and Curly seem to share an agreement, but Curly seemingly a little bit more hesitant, as "take care of it" and "kills 99% flash on the screen 3 more times. Jimmy echoes the message, telling Curly that he'll take care of it. Screen cuts to black for a moment before system failure flashes on the screen, accompanied by blaring alarms. We start running to the cockpit, flashing red lights and sirens engulf our screen. System failure flashes over and over, along with the Tolpar shaking vigorously. Getting closer to the cockpit, we see Jimmy sitting down right outside the door with his head down. The flashes, the sirens, the shaking, steadily increasing. Curly says, "Jim, tell me you didn't," before stumbling over his words. "I should have. I didn't. What did you do?" Jimmy doesn't respond. Curly enters the cockpit. Crash imminent flashes on all the monitors before we hear a loud crash, and the screen fades to white, marking the end of Chapter 17. We see that Anya has told Jimmy about the pregnancy without Curly being there, which gives us some interesting reaction from Curly. You know, he kind of panics a little bit, but he sounds like the broken record he is, keeps saying he'll fix it, and you see a lot of that influence on Jimmy in the present day. You know, they're very similar in that regard. And then, you know, obviously the nitty gritty of this chapter is the conversation between Jimmy and Curly. Really interesting stuff. It boils down to what looks like them like agreeing to kill everybody, including themselves. Kind of crazy, but you know, it looks like it seemed like a moment, a lapse in judgment from Curly there. He it looked like he gave him an agreement, but he also seemed very hesitant to do it, and it sucks, man. It sucks. And then we get to the end in that like 30-second sequence with the actual crash. I really like that. The blaring sirens, the flashing lights, it really worked well. And I liked the kills 99% addition to the flashes. I like, you know, the callback to the mouthwash. It's also the first time we see Curly's model, which is just kind of interesting. I kind of wish we never did see his model. It kind of added a little bit extra mystery to it, but it was cool. Nice little addition. Also, the music leading up to seeing Jimmy, great touch. It was super intense. I like that a lot. And then, we're getting to the end here, and it's starting to heat up. Turning 1 hour before Judgment is on the screen, along with Jimmy carrying Curly in his arms, bridal style. As Jimmy heads to the lounge, we hear Curly's raspy breathing, till we arrive and see all the other crewmates' dead bodies sitting around the table. Jimmy drops them on the table. Just then, the bodies wake up and start clapping. They've got party hats on and balloons everywhere, wishing Jimmy a happy birthday. Swansea toasts to Jimmy, then takes a swig of mouthwash. Anya goads Jimmy into a speech, but the player is prompted to pick up the knife. When viewing the inventory, the only description on it is "get the job done." Jimmy uses the knife, begins chopping into Curly's leg. Simultaneously, the screen and audio distort as Curly screams and cries of pain bleed through with every stroke until the screen cuts to black. We come back to Curly's painful moans. Jimmy tells him that lots of people struggle to put food on their plates, but he needed more, didn't he? The lowest rung of Curly's ladder is the crew's highest, until it was all swept away from his feet. Jimmy continues saying that life wasn't even worth living at the same level as the rest of them, but he forgives him, they all do. He echoes Curly's messages to the crew throughout the game. He won't give up on him, he believes in him. They're going to make it through this. Jimmy remarks that sometimes we thrive traveling the endless reaches of space, but other times we just have to accept days like these, paralleling he and Curly's previous conversation in Chapter 8. Jimmy finishes, telling everyone, let's eat and let's survive, as we continue on to Chapter 19. Now this is really where we're getting into the thick of it. We're pretty close to being to the end of the game here, but Jimmy has finally slipped fully into madness. I think this is the kind of marking point for that. He's basically gotten everybody in the crew killed at this point, whether it's directly or indirectly. He's propping them up like puppets, pretending they're still alive. There's a lot of great stuff still in this chapter. The segment where we're cutting Curly's leg off, this weird music buzzing, crying noise while we're doing it, really, really well done. And there's a lot of good callbacks to previous parts of the game in their conversation here. You know, the first one is when they're talking about the rungs and the ladder, a great analogy that they've referenced a few times now, bringing that back up. And then the one that I really like is the one from Chapter 8, where Curly was talking about how some days are great, and then some days they're not so great, but that's what makes the great days good. And we bring this back up with Jimmy talking about Curly's accomplishments and his glory days of traveling throughout space with his crew, and now it's all coming to a crash, to an end. And also tying that back into him not even being able to accept this and living like the rest of the crew. You know, we saw in the last chapter how Curly and Jimmy were clearly alluding to crashing the ship, killing everybody basically, and Curly seemed to agree to that, even if it was hesitant. He seemed to, kind of have an unspoken agreement, and that is truly just because he didn't want to lose his job, he didn't want to lose his reputation, and I just think it's so well done as we get closer to finishing up the game. Take Responsibility is on the screen as we're placed in a dark hallway that leads to the medbay. The room is disheveled, ran down, blood everywhere, with Swansea's key to utility hanging over the vent entrance, now open. Reaching for the key causes you to fall into the vents as you're surrounded by the vent walls and giant industrial fans. Jimmy eventually comes across Daisuke, but he walks away before we can get to him. The lights flicker to red and Daisuke turns into a single bloody hibiscus flower. As the player progresses, the lights flick back to normal, but a vent cover appears with a note on it reading, "No turning back now." Turning around and continuing on causes the player's screen to become fuzzy, some distorted noises being sent back to the note, and "Take responsibility and take care of it" flashing on the screen again. So you must walk backward, keeping your eyes on the vent to progress. This gameplay loop repeats 2 times before we can move on. Walking back from the last one, Jimmy passes a pair of hibiscus flowers, 2 pink dumbbells, and a collection of disembodied hands. At the end of the hall is the same boarded up vent from the medbay, with a note on it reading, "Responsibility." Walking away from this vent takes considerably longer compared to the rest of them, and is paired with some liminal, distorted noises that we've come to know and love from this game. Eventually you're teleported to a normal Tulpar hallway. Jimmy can walk forward again until he reaches steps that are so steep that he falls down to a door. He opens the door, begins falling again, and he passes a long chute with leaves, through a platform with graves and hibiscus flowers, then down a corridor with poly posters covering the walls, until you reach another door. Upon opening this one, we fall into pools of blood. It's the medbay, except the room is rotated on its axis, so the ground and ceiling are the walls. The damaged vent is covered with a grate, and there is an abhorrent amount of axes lodged into the wall above and around it. The grate falls open as Jimmy approaches it, crawls through the vent system that is now riddled with foam. You can hear what sounds like a rhythmic heartbeat in the background and something else possibly crawling around the vent. We then encounter a path that leads to another hibiscus flower trapped behind a fence with loose wires and sparks flying around it. Jimmy begins to turn back as the axe flies from the other side of the hallway, lodging itself into the vent wall, making a very loud noise that scared me. Crawling past that leads to an opening in the vent. Jimmy drops down to see Swansea tied up in a chair with the gun on the ground in front of him. The player is prompted to pick up the gun, aim it at Swansea, and squeeze the trigger. Jimmy's then teleported to a gameplay section at a graveyard where Swansea hunts you down with his axe. He'll try to sneak up on you and attack. If he's successful, then kills 99% will flash on the screen again. This section is easily the scariest part of the game to me. There's a lot of other segments with cool body horror, just cool horror concepts in general, but this section is genuinely stressful to play, having to defend yourself against Swansea charging at you from random positions. The AI is actually super impressive. Eventually, we come across a mausoleum for Daisuke with his pictures, lit candles, and hibiscus flowers on the altar. After successfully shooting Swansea 3 times before he can get to you, the screen cuts to white. We return back to Jimmy with the gun and Swansea tied up, except they're silhouetted by a screen that plays various clips of miscellaneous videos. Swansea tells Jimmy to shut up as he begins his monologue. He talks about how he spent a lot of his life as a drunk, until one day he saw a premonition, that being of his own dead body found in some ditch somewhere. It scared him straight. motivated him to lead a normal life: collared shirt, mortgage, credit card, all the things that make a good man. He laments that he hoped he could raise his kids to be better than him, that he wanted to be someone who wasn't just one setback away from his worst self. But the sad truth is that the drive, the dedication to the routine, the endless desperation to get shit done was the only thing keeping him from the alcoholism. He never truly changed, till ultimately, now that he knows he's about to die, he realized that his wife, kids, sobriety, all of his accomplishments in his life never felt as good as when he was drunk. They never felt as good as he expected when he finally crossed that finish line. Those nights he was spinning out of his head, sinking in the sofa, broken glass in his palms, all nausea, wreckage, vomit, ugly cruelty, his only problem being an empty bottle. Those were the best days of his life. He has nothing to hide, he's aired it all out, he's ready to face the music. Swansea can see himself for what he truly is, but Jimmy, he's too cowardly to see it in himself. Finishes his speech regretting how he should have protected Daisuke. Jimmy tells him once again that he's gonna fix it. They're all going to make it, before Jimmy lifts the gun as the screen fades out. Okay, now we've just gone off the rails here, haven't we? So, starting off in the med bay, cool visuals, I guess, with the rundown room, and the vents are pretty eerie to walk through. It's all right. And then this is kind of like the Daisuke part. This is like the Jimmy has gone fully insane crazy in his head, and we're seeing like his guilt personified is what I think this is, and it's the Daisuke part. We see a lot of hibiscus flowers. They like to use that as symbolism for Daisuke a lot. The little gameplay section in the vents, I was not the biggest fan of. I'm not gonna lie, like it was all right, but the actual like function of it was kind of spotty sometimes. It was like I could have done with that. I could have just walked through that area, I think. And it's like I'm not playing this game for like to have some crazy innovative gameplay, to be honest. So it was like a little bit annoying, I'm not gonna lie, but it wasn't that bad. It's served a purpose, I guess. And the mausoleum is kind of like where we transition into Swansea's part, but it's still, a bit of Daisuke. I think it's because, that kind of dynamic was Daisuke, Jimmy, and Swansea. Swansea obviously the one that killed him, but it was Jimmy's fault. So, you kind of have this ceremony, this collection of them three, and Jimmy's kind of recollection of the events, I feel like. And that gameplay section was really good. With Swansea chasing you have to shoot him 3 times. Like, the AI was actually terrifying when I was playing it. Maybe I'm just a baby, but like it was genuinely scary. And you don't want to shoot Swansea either, so you kind of get that little hint in it as well. Yeah, and then after that we get to absolutely the saddest part of this game, to Swansea's monologue, and the other characters are really sad. Obviously, Daisuke might be the most tragic because he was just a kid and then he dies for no reason, and then Anya's is more tragic probably. But for me, the way that the game portrays these things is what makes it really sad, really tragic. And Anya's is kind of purposefully not super important because that serves a purpose to Jimmy's character. Jimmy doesn't, he kind of blocks Anya out. That's how he treats her because he's a terrible person. And then, Daisuke's was terrible, had to kill him. It was his fault for getting him killed. But then Swansea's is like, he gets this full monologue of him talking about his life and his mistakes, and it is so sad. Like that paired with the music and the noises behind it, it was like there's something with that tone of that from that music that just made me sad. I was low, I was about to tear up. It was just an amazingly well written speech too, by the way. And directed, the silhouette with the clips, it was amazing. It's like this person needs to direct a movie. Like, this dev team needs to direct a movie, because it is so good. It's very sad, very tragic for Swansea. You see just how, we already know that Jimmy is super delusional and out of his mind, crazy, but we see just how crazy he is at the end of this chapter when he has tied up Swansea, and Swansea's like, I'm gonna die, giving him his final will, and then he's like, I'm gonna fix this, we're gonna be okay. It really hammers home how delusional he is, as we are very close to finishing the game. Chapter 20 begins with Swansea's bloodied corpse in front of Jimmy, and take responsibility on the screen. Leaving utility, and something is instantly off. There's more corners and turns than usual. The Tolpar walls seem endless as Jimmy keeps walking. The metal pipes that are usually uniform and small become larger, denser, until they adorn the entire interior of the Tolpar's walls. After a bit more walking, we can look below the grates that are the floor of the ship to see a huge, oversized version of Curly's face right below Jimmy's feet, his lone eye following our every move. Eventually, the halls turn into winding tunnels as bloody eyeballs increasingly line them. The ambient sounds intensify and the eyes squelch. Suddenly there's a bang, and the tunnel of eyeballs has transformed into a narrow tunnel of flesh. The hall ends with teeth lining the top of the entrance onto a metal platform. Looking back at the tunnel we just exited, it's actually the mouth of a giant disembodied curly head, except the eye's missing and it's buried in amorphous flesh. All I could think about was when you die in Death Stranding and you're in Sam's mouth and you see the baby. That was all I could think about. There's a catwalk that leads to something in the distance. Heading down it, we see a regular-sized Curly, seated with multiple valves and tubes connected at various points of his body, and 6 monitors surrounding him. Each monitor seemed to display a different portion of Curly's intestinal tract. He's facing a TV screen playing a vintage cartoon similar to the one we saw in Chapter 4, with animals singing along to the song, A Party for Mother Goose, until the clip freezes when one of the animals brings out a birthday cake. The player is then prompted to take Curly's leg from within the program. When you do, Feast flashes on the screen with big red letters, before cutting to a clip of a young boy slicing into and then eating a cut of meat. You are then tasked with feeding Curly his own leg flesh, but if you do this before lining up his intestinal tract, using the monitors and valves, he will immediately vomit his leg back up. Shifting these valves will result in a loud creak, the screen distorting, and Curly understandably grunting in pain. After successfully lining up the valves and the tubes in the correct position, the flesh will pass into his stomach and all the monitors will switch to static. Looking back at the TV screen, the words "Help Me" briefly appear before cutting to an image of Jimmy floating in a vast field of space. He makes his way through the expanse, and each time he gets close to the edge of the screen, the angle switches, before he eventually reaches Curly, who's sitting in a chair engulfed in flames. Curly pleads with Jimmy. He wants to go home, but Jimmy responds with, "We are home." Curly asks Jimmy why he doesn't just finish what he started, since no matter what, if someone actually eventually finds them, he'll still be the villain. Jimmy will be the better man in the end, like he always wanted. Jimmy falls to his knees and begins to weep. He tells Curly that they can both be the heroes. They're a team like they used to be. That everything that happened was an accident. He admits he made a mistake and apologizes over and over with his face in his hands as the chapter ends. Now, I kind of think that this chapter should have been the end of the game. Now, it's not to say that the next two chapters are bad or anything, but I would have loved if it ended off on this note with Curly and Jimmy in the vast expanse of space and this awesome imagery. It's such a symbol of the game. It encompasses all of the aspects of it. Curly on fire, Jimmy lamenting over what he's done. It's in space. It has that claustrophobic feel, and it brings you back to the roots of the game. And their last conversation encompasses the two main characters really well. And I would have loved it as an ending. Like I said, not to say the next two chapters are bad or anything, but that would have been perfect if you ask me. Other than that, I know I keep harping on it, but the sound design in this game is like truly so good. In the hallways, any of the hallways, it is just like either when you're stepping in the fleshy hallway and you just hear the moist ground under you that you're stepping on, amazing, or in the space segment right after Jimmy completes the valves, and you get this like ambient liminal noise, like not even music, but like it's almost angelic in your ears, and it sets the tone for this segment so well. All the hallway sections, when you're walking up at the very beginning with the crazy pipes and the eyes and the intense music, it's just amazing. So yeah, I mean, just another banger chapter that I think it should have been the final chapter. There is two more chapters. One of them has a kind of cool gameplay segment and some more cool stuff. Like I said, both still good chapters, but that would have been the perfect ending if you ask me. Penultimate chapter begins with take responsibility on screen once more, and Jimmy seemingly in the vents again. The vent halls are bloodied with organic materials strewn across all of the walls. As we move deeper in, Jimmy comes across a giant red, pulsating mass of flesh with two eye-like slits, along with an ultrasound scanner placed on a table nearby it. The player must use the scanner to get a clear image of the inside of the mass, first seeing blurry images with oscillating noises until using it on the flesh. As we're looking through the mass, you can hear a heartbeat increasingly growing louder and louder the closer we get to what we're trying to find, which ends up being a fetal horse showing its outline and skeletal system. Hovering over the horse fetus for a few seconds makes it disappear, as well as making the slit jitter a little bit. We do this twice before seeing a baby's face emerging from within, accompanied by muffled cries. Jimmy's forced off the ultrasound scanner as the lights begin to flicker, the mass begins to pulsate and shake faster, sirens blare, and a pair of large eyes start shifting along the exterior of the flesh, until a creature bursts out, alien facehugger style, tearing open the mass as the screen turns black. Polly chimes sound again, then an unknown figure says all clean, followed by I hope this hurts flashing on the screen, mirroring the very beginning of the game, and lines advertising the Dragon Breath mouthwash. This repeats a few times before Jimmy is teleported back to the vents. We traverse into the vents until Jimmy comes across this massive creature that burst out of the mass, latched onto the ceiling this time. It seems to be a caterpillar and polypony amalgamation, hundreds of legs and eyes with a poly head. Approaching the creature causes it to bolt into the maze of vent halls as it emits a piercing screech. The player has to navigate the halls while avoiding the monster. If it catches you, the screen becomes staticky, more glitchy text is displayed on the screen, and the player gets reset. After a while, the player is transported to a locked door in a long, dark hallway. Moving down the hallway, eventually the room and walls begin to fill with the worker IDs of the crew, almost as if it's raining. Eventually, you can hear a muffled, incomprehensible voice in what sounds like some kind of demonic gibberish, I guess. I don't know. Eventually, we get to a point in the hall where the entire ground is filled with empty mouthwash bottles, so much so that Jimmy is just walking on top of mounds of them. He reaches a staircase after a while with empty bottles of mouthwash falling from above. Upon reaching the top, spotlights illuminate giant hills of the same mouthwash bottles, until the final spotlight reveals Polly standing at the center. Starts conversing with Jimmy, calling him his boss. Jimmy remarks that both him and Pony Express are dead and gone. Polly says that he knows Jimmy sees himself as caged and misunderstood in this predicament he's gotten everyone into. He's cut off by the Polly chime, then sorry flashes on the screen. to which Jimmy says, "Shut up." Polly has now moved to a mound under a moonlit night sky. Jimmy tells him that Curly and him both tried their best, but Curly is the better man. He sees that now, and they can both still make it. Jimmy will take care of him. He'll take responsibility for his actions. He concludes by telling Curly he's sorry once again. Polly asks him if he really means it, and Jimmy says yes, he messed up, but he can still make things right. He begins to reiterate that their worst moments don't make them monsters, but Polly cuts him off. He says, if all that is true, then why is he still concerned with him, as the chapter ends. Alright, we're nearing the end here, folks. We are very close. Another good chapter, though. I said last chapter I wish it ended there, but these are still good chapters, and they still have a lot of good stuff in them, like the body horror in this part. It reminded me a lot of the movie The Void from a few years ago, and, you know, both have, like, kind of like a pregnancy thing in it as well, but just like the fleshy masses, it really remind me a lot of that, and the imagery connected to Jimmy, you know, obviously with Anya and the baby, it's clearly some kind of trauma that he's bringing up in his brain in these last moments here. You know, obviously it isn't real life, but this is what he's seeing, you know, and he's got it's definitely got to do with Anya, but the visuals are awesome. The big monster, I don't know, it's a little weird. It looks cool, but I can't, it doesn't fit the rest of the game, if you know what I mean, like the vibe of the rest of the game, but it still looks cool, and the sounds it makes are really cool. All of that gameplay section isn't bad. It's kind of just like all the other ones, but, you know, I've been saying that if this game was literally just a walking simulator, it would have been better, but it's all right. And then we get to the part where he's walking up to Polly with the ID cards and the mouthwash bottles. I mean, it's just kind of cool. I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot of symbolism or anything in there. It's just kind of a cool touch, and I liked it. Then you get to the conversation with Polly, and it is really interesting. A lot of the writing there is great. You know, I think it's really cool how Polly kind of signifies this presence in Jimmy's mind, playing on his emotions, asking him if he really means his apology, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's just kind of this bug in the back of his head. And I find it cool that Polly, the Polly statue, is the thing it materializes as. Also, a fun fact, it's confirmed that Jimmy was the one that destroyed the Polly statue in the lounge. So when we get to the end of the conversation, all that is true, why are you still concerned with him? It's a good ending. Segue into the next chapter, final chapter. And it's just, this whole chapter is done really well to convey Jimmy's delusions, even to the point where he actually genuinely believes the stuff he's saying here. Like, he's genuinely sorry, but, you know, he's not. He's just crazy. So, you know, another good chapter as we get to the twilight of the game here. Ooh. We return to Curly on the dining table, surrounded by corpses, with 0 hours before judgment on the screen. There's a plate with some of Curly's flesh in front of each crewmate. Jimmy's is the only one that's been eaten. Pick up Curly and leave the lounge. The only noise is his labored breathing, then eventually sounds of rainfall. The player is given the objective to go home, as Jimmy makes his way to the utility room. To enter utility, the rain ceases, and the only thing you can do is place Curly in the lone cryopod, as our POV switches to Curly, triggering the final dialogue of the game. We're only able to look around as Curly, as you listen to Jimmy detail his thoughts to both Curly and the player. He places his hand on the window to the cryopod as he looks directly into Curly's eyes. And reassures him, saying it's okay, telling him he's gonna be okay. He says that Curly always had his back, but he ended up hurting him even though he was supposedly trying to save everyone. But now Curly will survive, as he reiterates that together they can fix anything, just like Curly said. Jimmy tells him he was proud that he got to be his friend and co-pilot, and that they fixed it. He fixed it. Jimmy then walks out of view of the window, as there's a moment of silence before we hear a loud bang and see a flash and a thud, as Jimmy ultimately decided to kill himself. The main theme of the game fades in as the cryopod slowly freezes and the credits begin to roll. Boom. Mouthwashing. Now I want to talk a bit more about Wrong Organ's other game, How Fish is Made, but more specifically its DLC titled The Last One and Then Another, as is directly connected to Mouthwashing, as well as do a little bit of a deeper analysis on our two main characters, Curly and Jimmy. How Fish is Made is a short, narrative-driven game about the illusion of choice. Play as a sardine who is imposed with a very prophetic choice to go up or down. You can talk to other fish on your journey to help guide your decision, but the irony of it all is that it doesn't matter if you choose up or down. Both endings are the same. How Fish is Made is a very surrealist experience that I thoroughly enjoyed for the 30 minutes to an hour of playtime you spend on it, but our focus is on the DLC. Also, the base game and the DLC is free, so check it out for yourself, along with Mouthwashing, of course. The DLC, The Last One and Then Another, at face value is just an advertisement for Mouthwashing in the same style of the main game that features Curly throughout, encouraging players to play Mouthwashing. But looking a little deeper, there's some interesting dialogue that serves to deepen our understanding of Curly and his relationship with Jimmy, mainly. The DLC is a free Katamari-like game where we play as a sardine once again, except this time we're stuck in the repair foam from the tulpar, as our objective is to roll around and absorb fleshy bits in our fellow fish to become more massive. The first bit of dialogue we get from Curly seems to refer to Curly's desire to feel more fulfilled and his gripes with his career or where his life is at. He says, "It's easy to get on this boat when you have to. You say to yourself, this is just temporary, just until I get what I need. Got bigger things planned. Then suddenly you're 1 year in, 5 years, 10. First I couldn't stand the constant noise. Now I can't sleep without it. A lot of things can't follow you out here, but it also means the outside world moves on without you. Won't even notice until it's too late. Easy to get on, hard to leave." This dialogue allows us to sink our teeth into Curly's troubles a little deeper, which I love. One of my biggest gripes with Mouthwashing is that Curly is so interesting from the interactions we get from him early in the game especially, but eventually it's all Jimmy at some point. Here we get some background of Curly's mental struggles with his career and purpose. On one hand, he's an uber-successful freighter captain who seems to make great money compared to the rest of the crew, but on the other, he's unsatisfied with his life. Who cares if you're really great at piloting a ship over long distances, if that doesn't offer some higher purpose or gratification? Is this really all he'll ever be? We also get a peek into Curly's psyche when it comes to the effects of long-haul trips on a noisy old ship in space. He mentions getting used to the constant noise the tulpar emits, assumedly due to its poor condition, as well as the benefits of being able to run away from his problems back home, to the stars. But simultaneously it means the world moves on without him, and you won't realize it when it's too late to turn back, try something new, or even change your career. It's easy to get a job on a long-haul freighter. I doubt many want to do it, but it's hard to leave one. The next piece of dialogue I want to cover mostly refers to Curly and his regrets regarding Jimmy. He says, "Next comes spite. First it stares back at you in the mirror, then it's those around you. They're wearing your face, and you theirs. You know, he joined because of me." What were the words I used? Alright, it's a great opportunity, easy money, just a trip or two. Someone else's words in my mouth. Hey, they worked on me as well, right? Change hurts, but worse things fester for a long time. I told him as much. I tried, I really did. We're defined by our past, but not slaves to it. We said tomorrow will be different. Today would be the last day, the last one, and then another. And another, and another, and another. These comments not only reveal a lot about his thoughts and relationship with Jimmy, but also a lot about Jimmy's motivation and his past. The first bit is obviously referring to Jimmy and his spite towards Curly, always wanting to be who Curly is, but simultaneously looking up to him to an extent. I think the next line connects these ideas. They're wearing your face and you theirs. Jimmy wants to be Curly, but I also think that Curly wants to be like Jimmy, in the sense that he envies the freedom Jimmy has. Perhaps he doesn't envy things like his financial situation back home, but things like the freedom he has in his career and his life to change things still. He's younger, all of that. Then Curly recalls getting Jimmy this job, but I think the most interesting part of this segment is the comments about change. They affect Jimmy since the change from working on Earth to the long-haul freighter for months or even years on end contributed to his psychotic break, but also the fear of change when he learned the news that the crew was being laid off, the straw that broke the camel's back effectively. But for Curly, it's not things changing for him that causes things to fester, it's things around him changing. This goes back to the dead pixel conversation, all these little things changing around Curly that he couldn't see, because all he can do is look at the bigger picture, allowing these worse things to fester. Final chunk of this dialogue. We said tomorrow will be different. Today would be the last one, and then another, and another, and another, and another. Which brandishes the name of the DLC, I think perfectly sums up Curly and Jimmy's connection and similarity. Persistence. Throughout the game, what's the one thing we see both Curly and Jimmy do? Constantly reiterate how they will fix things ad nauseum. Anya confides in Curly, literally tells him that she was raped by Jimmy, and his answer is, "Oh, I know him, I'll talk to him, everything will be okay, I'll fix it." Jimmy goes to Curly after this and tells him neither of them can come back from this, and suggests purposefully crashing the Tolpar to fix it. And Curly says the same thing, "It's okay, we'll fix this," and even goes so far as to let Jimmy pilot the ship by himself after this. The same thing with Jimmy. He gets Daisuke hurt by making him go into the vents. "I'll fix it, don't worry." Right before murdering Swansea in cold blood, what does he say to him? "It's okay, I'll save us all, I'll fix it." They never do they? In this instance, I think it is absolutely a bit of introspection from Curly, especially since all of this dialogue is confirmed to be canon. Not only that, but the ending scene in the last one and then another seems to take place during the first time Jimmy gives Curly his painkillers in Chapter 2, further suggesting that the dialogue from the DLC takes place then. And there you have it, that was Mouthwashing. I can't lie, I didn't think going into it that this game would have one of my most hated antagonists probably ever, but lo and behold, Ron Gordon created Jimmy. I want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for watching this video. I hope my editing isn't too bad. I ask for some patience since this is my first video. But if you guys have any suggestions for games, stories, or anything along those lines for me to cover next, please leave a comment. And thanks again for watching.